Hey everyone, this is Vassals of Kingsgrave here to discuss the first half of Rings of Power Season 2, which came to us in a big episode dump of the first 3 episodes on Amazon Prime a week ago. We just got the fourth episode, so we're already halfway through the season. My name is Bina007. I'll be your host today, and I am joined by Mary.
Hi everyone, it's Mary or Nymeria on the Discord.
And also by Adam.
Hey, this is Adam, also known as DrownedSnow.
Fantastic. And we will potentially spoil anything in the Tolkien verse today, although I am very much not a lore master and shocking lack of knowledge may well rear its ugly head on this episode. The way we're going to do it is we're going to do lemon cake ratings for the first half of this season, discuss a little bit how we come to it, like are we big Tolkien fans? And then we'll get into a discussion of the 4 episodes rather than doing it episode by episode, which would take forever. I thought maybe we'll just go region by region or sort of plot thread by plot thread and see what we think. So, Mary, let me start with you. What's your relationship with Tolkien and the source material? And how many lemon cakes would you give the first half of this season?
Okay, so I think I'm definitely not a lore master. Very much a fan of the books, of the Jackson movies. I've read The Silmarillion, but I haven't read anything else in the extended universe. So I'm not a very purist fan, but at the same time, I enjoy the fact that it all makes sense together. It's a very well built universe. So, and I love things being consistent, basically. So that's my big thing. What would I rate it so far? Maybe 3.5. I think the show looks beautiful. It already did in season 1, and it's really, you can see that there's been a lot of money and effort put into that. But I'm like in season 1, I still think the characters are not that well written, and the acting is not amazing. The script, basically the dialogue, the story is not so well put together. So that's my beef with it. But it does look great.
Well, I will say everything Mary said, I completely endorse and agree with, and I have the same relationship to the text. I'd also be a 3.5. I think I'm enjoying it more than last season. I think it's cohering more. The stakes are higher. We're getting into the action. And I like that they gave us 3 episodes because I felt you needed that long just to sort of get each of the plot points forward. And I appreciated that. So, yeah, 3.5 for me too. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a like a Tolkien lore master or anything like that. I'm certainly no #Greg. Like growing up, The Hobbit was like one of my favorite books, and we had the old Rankin and Bass cartoons they'd show at school and stuff. But I never read Lord of the Rings or anything until the first film came out. I was a teenager, and I'd have to like get rides to work, and sometimes like it was around my brother or my father's schedule or something, and it's like one day they drop me off. It was like a couple hours early, and I was like, well, there's the mall next door at the theater. I'm like, oh, I'll just go see a movie. And it ended up being like it was the Fellowship of the Ring. I think it was like second or third week it was out or something. And I was like, this looks like it's for nerds. What is this? And then I ended up watching it. And of course, it's like a 3-hour movie. So I was late for work. And it was a very transformative experience, I guess, because I read the books after that and, became a huge fan. I've read the Silmarillion and a lot of the other works. But I'm not like a huge purist in that sense. I mean, I've read Lord of the Rings, probably a dozen times now, since then. But I don't expect these to be, 100% faithful. And especially because I know they don't have the rights to actually do that. But I like the fact that they gave us 3 episodes right away because I agree it's, you have to remember what happened last year and it's kind of slow. And I think I'm enjoying it much more this year. I give these first batch of episodes like a 3 out of 5. Like, they're enjoyable. And partially because my expectations, I guess, are tempered. I realize like we're not going to get this, we're not going to get that. And I don't have the whole like, is that Gandalf? Is that Sauron? Like, which I thought was, a little bit of the lame part of the first season. And I agree with Marie that the writing isn't always the best. Dialogue's not always the best, but it looks great. They're putting a lot of effort, a lot of time into it. There's a lot of great actors. I mean, we got Tom Bombadil, and I don't know, that could be handled really poorly, and he didn't seem to suck. So I mean,
I liked him.
Reserving judgment. Yeah, I was like, he seems mysterious and cool and weird, but not too weird. Like this is very hard to pull off. So
yeah,
agreed.
we'll get to it. And now we can substitute, is it Saruman for is it Sauron? So there we go. Okay, folks, let's start off, which
Palando.
is, yeah, do you hear the drums, Palando? Let's start off with where the series actually, or the season starts, which is from Forodworth to Eregion. And we open at the dawn of the Second Age, and we have a different iteration of Sauron, who was played by Jack Lowden, known to fans of Slow Horses, also Mr. Saoirse Ronan. And he is attempting to convince Adar, who has been recast. So it's not Uncle Benjamin anymore. It's an actor called Sam Hazeldine. So he's trying to convince Adar and the Orcs to follow him after the death of Morgoth. And it feels a bit like a political stump speech. And he is seemingly about to be crowned by Adar when he is betrayed and stabbed and killed with that very crown. And then we get sort of effectively a bit of his backstory, bringing him up to date with him, losing his corporeal form and then sort of somehow sliming around and getting sort of re-physicalized, or whatever the word would be. And then basically going to the shipwreck where he meets Galadriel in season 1 and becomes the actor Charlie Vickers. And in episode 2, Sauron basically seduces Celebrimbor, right, in the form of Anatar. So he sort of brings another form, and we'll get into what happens next. But how did you guys find this bit of backstory? I must say, for me as a non-lore master, I found it really useful. And I kind of like the fact that sort of Adar and the Orcs get their own agency and, is this right for us? We're not going to just blindly follow Sauron. But how
That
did you
part I
guys
don't
feel?
like.
Really?
I don't need baby orcs or like everything has depth. Everything these days is complicated and nuanced, and that's great. But like sometimes, I just want like the fucking goblins to be evil.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Adam. I think it's super hard to adapt such a universe that's been written in such a way that you don't get all of that. Nothing is really nuanced, or you don't get baby orcs, you don't get orcs societies and agencies, and it's weird to put it to the screen. I agree, but at the same time, I don't know if they could have done it differently, really. The baby orcs is a specific thing, but even the way Sauron finds his body back at some point, or a new body, is, I felt like it was better left unwritten in a way, but they had to kind of write something and imagine something. So I'm not convinced, but I don't have any better ideas.
Oh, I'm the opposite of you guys. I really loved seeing that journey. I love the ideas that Adar and the Orcs aren't just unthinking minions and they must be convinced and maybe they will consider what's in their own interests. So I really like the backstory. This is what got me in. But anyway.
I like the idea of factionism, and I like the idea that like maybe there's a period where they're like F Sauron. Like I don't mind that part of it. But I just don't like the idea of like, oh, they're like oppressed or refugees, or like they're kind of supposed to be like twisted evil people beings, I guess. But I also will say that like in this scene we had 2 people recast, and like you only really noticed one of them. Like Adar hardly looks any different with the makeup and stuff.
Yeah.
I had to like see that online. I was like, oh wait, that's a different actor. And then the Sauron one is like you don't really know what's going on until you realize it's a flashback. I know there's a lot of criticism over the whole like symbiote venom goo stuff.
Oh, I
But
love that.
I mean, because I think
Why not?
it's
It's a
at the same
fantasy book.
time.
Why not?
I don't hate it, but I also agree like, oh, it is better left off the page because it's like this brief thing where you're like, his spirit fled and then his body reconstituted, and you can imagine whatever you want, and that's probably always better. But they had to do something, and I mean, I don't hate this. You could have made it more like wispy and ethereal, or whatever. I mean, he changes shapes, and he has fair forms, he has dark forms. Like, if you're going to show it, you're going to have to do something. So
Yeah. Oh, well, we will return to this. Meanwhile, back in the artist formerly known as the Southlands, now Mordor, the citizens thereof are struggling to survive, and they have to bend the knee or lose their lives in very graphic detail. The stranger / Lord Adar rules, and basically he's preparing the orcs for war on Sauron in episode 3. He's decided that it's not in their interest to follow him and that they will not be safe. And how do you all feel about the development of Adar and his? Is it just a power grab, or is there something real and serious in his sort of protective instincts towards the orcs, or is it just cynical exploitation?
That's really hard to read because they haven't really given him a lot of motivation other than what they've just sort of presented on a base level. But he doesn't necessarily seem to be power hungry. He doesn't also necessarily seem to be wanting, to find the best life for them, like by his actions. So I don't know. It's confusing.
How about you, Mary?
No, I don't think it's a power grab. I think there's some sincerity there, or at least that's what the show wants us to think, I think. But it's hard without any backstory, or at least maybe we got some backstory in season 1 for Adar. I don't really remember.
I don't think so.
But yeah,
Yeah, I rewatched season 1. No.
Yeah, so without that, it's not enough to really make us invested, I think, in his story and where he wants to go. But it definitely is against Sauron, which is interesting in itself, and it can bring interesting plot points.
He's kind of like a dark elf, basically, right? Or like a half converted elf is what it seems like.
Yeah.
Because like the orcs and stuff like originally were like tortured elves that were like twisted, and we don't really know how that works, but it seems sort of like he was someone maybe kind of in between that.
I mean, he's non-canonical, so who knows, right? He only exists within the show,
right?
But he's basically, according to the LOTR wiki, he has status as one of the Moriondor, the first elves to be captured and tortured by Morgoth.
There you go. Yeah.
So he's a fallen elf, basically. But he's not an orc. He is an elf that's just gone bad, basically. But
and
yeah.
I mean, Sauron was very fair, elfish looking in this. More surprisingly so, I guess, than I would have expected from this like orc rally.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm one of you, and they're like, not really.
Yes, because he takes always on the fair form of Jack Loudon. Okay, well let's move to the elves, because all things begin and end with them in Rings of Power. So I've called this part From Linden to Eregion, takes place over the 4 chapters or 4 episodes. So we start off in episode 1 where Galadriel and Elrond are definitely taking a different view of whether the Elven Rings of Power should be used, where Galadriel believes that, this is in the context of season 1 where the elves are basically dying out. And Galadriel believes that they should use the ring, whereas Elrond is very much, this is something from Sauron, we should definitely not use it. Galadriel is going to be sent to Eregion in episode 2, but Gil-galad does not trust her not to be seduced by Sauron because of what happened before, and he actually appoints Elrond as the captain of the group that's going to Eregion. Basically, they're going because they suspect that Sauron has somehow infiltrated and corrupted Celebrimbor, which is correct, and that the messages they're sending, which is, do not trust his avatar, do not let him in, is, coming too late because those people have been intercepted. And Galadriel is now also having ring-induced visions, which are fascinating, which Elrond distrusts. So that's also, I think, an interesting sort of part of this, like when the visions arrive. Galadriel gives Elrond this very moving speech saying, they have to, despite their differences, be opposed and unite in opposing Sauron, even if that means that she's going to die. And Elrond does reluctantly agree. And the final episode 4, ends basically with the elves meeting in battle with Adar and the orcs. And we see that Galadriel has healing powers with the ring. She gives the ring to Elrond and tells him to sort of head off to Linden while she deals with the orcs. And she is in the sort of final part of that final episode, cornered by Adar. So that's sort of a lot going on over the 4 episodes. It's probably the largest single plot thread, I guess. Galadriel's very much the star of the show. Yeah, I guess the theme is of us finding out what her wearing the ring gives her in terms of power. Mary, any thoughts on this part of the story?
Yeah, I'm actually quite okay with it. I'm liking Galadriel and Elrond's relationship more and more. I think, both actors are actually quite good, and it helps. There are other elves that I'm not so convinced by, but the 2 of them work quite well. And I also find interesting the whole thing about are these rings corrupted? Can we use them? Can we use them even if they are corrupted, but it's the only thing we have to save our people? That's actually something I find quite interesting and consistent with the kind of questions that you have in Middle Earth philosophy. The one I'm less convinced by is Gil-galad. I have to say, I find all of his interventions, I don't really trust him. I don't know where he stands. I don't understand. He's got a kind of, it's not wisdom that I get from him. It's indifference, which does not work really well.
Yeah, he has like a fake it till you make it sort of impression in a lot of the scenes, and I'm like, does he even know what's going on half the time?
Yeah.
That might be the actor's portrayal or something, but
Yeah, he doesn't, to me, seem to have the gravitas I would expect of Gil-galad, and someone who has the authority to
yeah,
command Galadriel and to say to her, I don't trust you, I'm going to put Elrond in charge. And I was thinking a lot about the portrayal of Elrond in Lord of the Rings and how the actor playing him just has such authority when he's chairing the Council of Elrond. You feel that he has real wisdom and he has the right to make these pronouncements. And I just never get that from Gil-galad. And I'm wondering if it's the script or the performance or maybe, I know elves don't age, casting someone older maybe.
I don't know, but I agree. The hierarchy feels wonky, and you don't really want to obey this guy because it doesn't feel right that he should give orders to the other characters that we have, just because he doesn't really get that. He doesn't have that charisma.
So when Galadriel's having her ring-induced visions, do we feel that they are genuine visions in terms of she now just has the power to see into the future or see into other places of what's happening? Or do you think they are in some way Sauron manipulated?
I think that's a great angle because I mean this jives with like the proper kind of history here is like the three elven rings were made kind of with Sauron's knowledge but sort of separate from his power kind of, so there's this like, are they safe to use, are they not safe to use, and we know they use them for a long time. I mean Galadriel has Nenya, when she meets Frodo in Fellowship, right, and she's seeing visions through that. How much influence is there from Sauron? It seems like there is a lot, obviously a lot less than the other rings, but I do like the fact that they chose Elrond as the one who's like, opposed to using them, and kind of has to bring up the fact that, hey, these could be dangerous, these could be used against us, because obviously that hasn't come up yet. These are the first rings, and then of course later on he is the bearer of one of these rings, right? So I mean there's a bit of irony there. At some point he kind of comes across, I guess, but also, when he takes the rings, it's like immediately after the end of last season, right? And he runs off, and there's a chase and all that, and like his haircut is completely different, y'all. Like I don't know, like they did something with his hair. It like sweeps in front now in kind of a weird way, and I was like, when did he have time to do this? Doesn't make any sense.
He's an elf. His hair do whatever
He did it
wants
on horseback.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was going to say there's a very specific point in I think it was episode 4 when the dwarves rings are made, where you can see Sauron. He's the one that puts the mithril in, and he like there's some time spent on just seeing the mithril in his hands. So I think it goes to the idea that maybe he didn't corrupt the 3 elven rings because he didn't really touch them or touch the material that was used to make them.
I kind of side with that view as well,
Yeah.
partly because why would, I don't know, like in the rise in Middle Earth, as we know in Lord of the Rings, with the rise of Sauron that people suspect and know and they can see Mordor's alive, why would Galadriel keep her ring on if she thought it was corrupting? So I think you have to assume that they're I mean, she doesn't know in Rings of Power, but I think by then you have to assume that they know that these were crafted separately in some way and therefore are safe.
Yeah, there's an aspect of like they are protected somewhat from the power of the One Ring, but also he doesn't have the One Ring, after the after he's defeated and stuff, like, so like they have a bit of protection there from him that the others don't enjoy.
Okay, should we move on to Khazad-dûm, or are you guys? I mean, it's related, right?
Just a point about the Barrow Whites.
Yes.
Oh,
Awesome
Same.
to
It
see them
felt
in action.
and the Entwives.
Yeah.
and the Endwives, but that's in the different. Yeah, but we see the
Yeah,
Barrow rights here
Yeah.
with the elves. Again, a bit weirded out for me, but at the same time, we have to see things. It can't be ethereal and said in a quick sentence like it could be in the Silmarillion or even Lord of the Rings, where it feels like everything is much more, yeah, much less corporeal in a sense. Like,
Mm.
I don't. This didn't really remind me of the Barrow chapter in the Lord of the Rings, but they still had to do something. I will just say that the blue eyes are very reminiscent of the whites in a Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Yes, which threw me a bit. I was like, oh, merging. Nope.
Maybe the designers are influenced by it. I was
looking for
comparing the white.
blue lips.
Yeah, I was comparing the whites, the Barrow whites, with how in Lord of the Rings, they showed, when Aragorn goes and gets his army of the dead, and then this really good CGI, but it was kind of very video gamey and maybe overused in the battle at Minas Tirith. And I thought that I preferred the Barrow whites and how they've been depicted. Certainly.
Yeah, I like this. I thought it was good, and they've been killing the messengers trying to get through to Celebrimbor, and I mean, it
Yep.
amazes me that Game of Thrones, like we have ravens, and it's like, oh, this is easy. And here they're like, we got to walk it out,
Should have sent the messengers by eagles, right? Like that's the cliche criticism everyone has of Lord of the
right?
Rings.
We just
Send
saw an
everything by
eagle,
eagle. Oh dear. Okay, so now our next sort of bit of plot is from Khazad-dûm to Eregion. You can see that a lot of roads lead there. So when we open in Khazad-dûm, Prince Durin refuses to make amends with his father Durin III, played by Peter Mullen, and his wife Disa, and he is struggling in poverty as a result. In episode 2, we see them summoned to Eregion by Celebrimbor, and in episode 3, they are presented with an offer of rings for the Dwarf Lords in exchange for Mithril. Durin's skeptical at first, but he apologizes to his father. He presents the trade and says, your people are starving. Maybe this is a chance for us to survive. So then we see by the end of episode 4 that they have indeed been given these rings that have been made in the presence of Anatar and so are presumably corrupt. Thoughts, Mary, on the whole dwarf plot?
I miss Elrond and Durin together. That was my favorite part of season 1, and we didn't get them together this time yet. Not much to say really. The dwarf singing was a bit weird. Do they only eat because they have this kind of vegetables growing, and when that goes, they don't have anything to eat? That seemed a bit like they didn't have.
It's weird.
poor,
Is there no
poor
trade?
planning.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
trade with other people.
Can't they just
Build
eat
stores.
stones?
And they're not trolls.
I mean, they talk about being fired in their mom's belly, that they come from the earth, and I'm like, maybe their dietaries,
Yeah.
are different.
Yeah, no, apart from that, I liked that Durin is not entirely won over by Anatar. He feels like something is not entirely right. And I think it's an interesting thing going forward that he's not entirely convinced, and everyone starts using these rings without being entirely sure that it's going to be good for them. But as a way of surviving, because they just don't have any other option.
Yeah, I agree. I love him as a character. I loved him with Elrond, as you say, and I think it sets him up for a reunion of Elrond and him, because they're going to be the two skeptics, even as the elves and dwarves are both now using the rings, and hopefully that our buddy romance will be back. Adam, thoughts on the dwarfish goings on?
The dwarves are always my favorite. Like I have a soft spot for dwarves, and I really loved the stuff from season 1, especially as you say, like Elrond and Durin is just always good. And I like the father and son stuff between the two Durins. We haven't really gotten a whole lot yet, and the dwarf rings don't end up so well and all that. But I did especially like him humbling himself and coming to his father, even though he kind of doesn't really agree with the plan, and There's a lot going on here. The stone singing thing I thought was kind of weird too. I'm like, I don't think that's anywhere, but that like really fits in line with dwarves, and it also immediately kind of goes away. Because it's really just there to show us that like they've awakened the Balrog, and like the mountain is like corrupting, and their connection to the mountain is corrupting, and like we need a way to realize that. So with the cave-ins and the lack of light and the singing not working, and like something is very rotten, and something's gonna go bad. So
I think the reason I'm not entirely convinced by it is also that it's all too quick. Like it should take years and generations for the dwarves to lose really their connection to the mountain, and for it to all go badly, and the corruption and everything. And it's gonna go on with the rings, I guess, but it feels too immediate for me.
The timeline for everything in this show is way too compacted, and there are events that are probably supposed to be hundreds of years apart, and that's definitely a weakness of I don't know if it's just the format or the story they're telling, but
and also something from Lord of the Rings too, right? I mean, Gandalf disappears for 17 years to go figure out what's going on with the ring. I mean, maybe
the movie was like, we're not going to have it where Gandalf goes off forever, and like it is much quicker pace.
I wonder if that's
it
something that's inevitable with Tolkien, because he works in millennia, right? His world is so built out that it works over spans of hundreds, thousands of years.
I mean,
And
he spent over a
therefore,
decade writing it, right?
yeah, and therefore, just normal narrative storytelling pace is not something he's particularly concerned with.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so hard to
true.
adapt.
Yeah, exactly.
But
He was like, before this publishes, I have to build a whole language and backstory.
Because he doesn't care about the narrative. He cares about building his world, and the narrative is just something that falls out of it. So, well, of
But
course,
I think if you make the choice to do that in a much more compacted way, you have to give more to write the thing so that everything happens for a reason, and you get why it's happening, and you get build-ups to things. And you don't get that here. You don't get
agree
building. You just have, now we've lost the mountain connection. Okay. And yeah, that's my issue with it. Even in doing this in a few years of storyline, you could do it with better building.
I agree, and I think that's where the sort of, as we've often referred to it, sort of slightly clunky writing and clunky kind of storyline plotting comes into play. I think it would always be problematic to try and create this in a compressed, normal storytelling pace, but a better set of writers might have done it better, I think is the best way to summarize that. Anything else on the dwarves, or should we move into Rune? No? Okay. So the next bit of journeying is all in Rune, where we catch up with halfling Nori Brandyfoot and the stranger, and they wander through this eastern land. It's very deserty, very dry, and they're tracked by a presumably young Saruman in episode 2 and a split up in episode 3, but we can get into the identity of maybe Saruman when we discuss it. So once they're split, we have Nori and Poppy. They bump into a half-foot-like person called Nobody, or Merrimack, as we then find out. He accidentally reveals he's heading back to his village with some stolen water, and they sort of, bully him into letting them come with him. And they go and find some stores who are led by Gundabel. And Nori then tells Gundabel the story about the stranger. Gundabel believes he's a friend of the mysterious Dark Wizard, and the Dark Wizard is saying that he will see to the stranger himself, while the person tracking the Harfoots should keep on doing so. Gundabel then also recounts the legend of a Burrows Harfoot who will lead the stores to a new and prosperous land, and it's absolutely heartbreaking because Nori tells her that the legend isn't true. They never found this land and they just kept wandering and don't really have a home, which is really very tragic. And then they're interrupted by the Dark Wizard's trackers, but Gundabel stands her ground and without revealing Poppy and Nori's location, sees them on their way. So other stuff will be happening in Rune, but just focusing on Poppy and Nori, how did you find this storyline and meeting the stores? Adam, do you want to go first?
I just like I've been this way since we first met the Harfoots. Like I'm just ready for them to find the Shire. I mean, this is all. I don't have any problem with any of this. It's all fine. I'm just like get to the Shire. But
Yeah. That's the Shire. It's that paradise that they are eventually gonna find. I like that they met another group of halflings. I think they work well, the Harfoots and the stores now generally, because they're a bit clunky themselves, but it worked better with who they're supposed to be, and I think it gives them it's charming and it's just a bit funny, and I love them. I really like the way they're written. So yay.
Yeah, I like this segment very much. I don't have much to say about it. Do you think it's young Saruman with a black beard, played by Mance Rayder himself?
So is that the dark withered person?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know. I would find it really against
it'd be
the
odd.
yeah, a bit odd, and I'd prefer it for him to be a completely invented character that is being defeated, has been defeated in this age, and that it's okay that we don't hear about him in Lord of the Rings, for example, rather than
Yeah.
Saruman, who's supposed to still be good at this point. I think
He can be
So
like the failed tan wizard that we never hear about, you know?
exactly, yeah.
Like someone said maybe he's one of the blue wizards or something and is like gone astray. But I was like, please not Saruman, because then that would
Yeah.
make Gandalf being like, you know, bros and being like, we're the best, kind of wouldn't make any sense.
Extra stupid, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I felt that Saruman was meant to still be quite good, almost to the start of Lord of the Rings, and that it's quite shocking in that 17 years when Gandalf goes to consult with Saruman and is quite shocked to discover that he has fallen, and that's quite a recent thing in the build up to Lord of the Rings. And it's somehow a little bit similar with Denethor, that the inevitable, seemingly inevitable and pessimistic rise of Mordor means that they sort of are struggling for solutions, right? And Denethor just falls into despair, but with Saruman, he feels you can't beat him, so you may as well join him. But it feels to me like that's much more reason than him already being a dark wizard now. But then why are they playing all coy and calling him dark wizard? It's just annoying. It's like the whole naming of Sauron thing. Just tell us already.
Because it's probably extra character, and you know they want people to guess about who it is so that it'll create buzz, and then it'll come out and it's Bob the wizard, you know, and then they're like, oh,
Yeah, but we already
you
got
know,
that
it's
from
better for marketing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Saruman, I think that the idea was that his corruption was over time, and it started long before Lord of the Rings, but like he kind of toyed with, I think he toyed with the idea of like, you know, power for himself and all that, but really it wasn't until very shortly before, you know, with Sauron re-rising and all that, where he's like, yeah, we're gonna team up, and you know, if I get that ring, I'll be the king.
Okay,
yeah,
well maybe then it
you
does
go back
make
to the
sense.
Hobbit.
Start
I
at
think
this
he was
early.
still a good guy. So
okay. Yeah, timeline confusion. I will put that on hold until we know who he is. But yeah, I quite like this whole storyline. I have to say, I like the next one too. So elsewhere in Rune, in episode 4, we finally get Tom Bombadil, played by Rory Kinnear. He's a really fine character actor from England. The stranger seemingly stumbles upon him and keeps losing his map, and is promptly swallowed up by Old Man Ironwood, who may be Old Man Willow. I'm not sure. And Tom just utters some cryptic things and apparently wanders off. And later, when he can be bothered, rescues the stranger from the tree, introduces himself and draws a bath, because that's how Tom Bombadil does. And then the stranger hears old Tom singing with a woman who I guess we assume is Goldberry, but Tom's all cryptic and says there's no one else in his home. And which was really funny. And Tom Bombadil also explained that he's the eldest and was seemingly on Middle Earth before everything else, before there were stars, rivers, and trees. And so the stranger then asks for help on wielding a staff. Like he got into trouble with Old Man Ironwood because he was trying to like get a staff. And Tom says that, you know, a staff like your name is yours to wield already if you prove yourself worthy of it. classic sort of Master Yoda shenanigans there. And then the stranger comes to the realization that he was never meant to find the stars on the map, but basically to find Tom Bombadil. And Tom also reveals that the Dark Wizard once came to him seeking to control magic. You know, Tom has this very elemental nature where he doesn't like control magic. Magic just is. So I have to say, all of this utterly charming. I think I love Rory Kinnear. I think he's struck just the right tone as Tom, that Tom is somehow otherworldly or pre-worldly. But he was never comic. He was never silly, but he was strange. And I loved it. I really loved the interaction. So more Tom Bombadil, please, from my perspective. Mary, how do you feel about this section?
The two, I think the tone is right, the acting is right for Tom. I mean, I think it's a risky move to include Tom Bombadil, but at the same time, it's a character that's not. We don't really know who he is, when he came, what he does, where he comes from. I think there's nowhere in Tolkien's written works do we get real answers to that. I think it changed over time. I remember reading a very long Wikipedia page saying that basically even Tolkien changed his mind and wrote some inconsistent things about Tom Bombadil. So it gives way to new portrayal and a new way of thinking about this character that I think could work really well with the show. But I don't know how any of the purists react to that. Maybe they're not even watching by this point, so
I think by
I
this
don't know.
point they've thrown their toys out the pram at so much other stuff that I don't think there's much energy left. Oh, Adam, how about you?
Oh man, yeah, that's my curiosity too, because I'm like, Bombadil is one that it's like Bombadil or bust, man. And it could have been bust, and I would love to see what the reaction is. I haven't really gone online to look at any of this, but like I loved all this. Like I thought like, oh no, Bombadil, this is gonna suck. This is like, because it's so easy to screw this up, and they still could, but it was beautiful the way he was just very aloof. It was almost like, the dude, he's just been around forever, and oh, that guy's in the tree, come on now, get out of the tree, and there's the songs, but then they're just like there but not obtrusive, and I don't know, it's like not too silly, not too serious. They could take it the wrong direction with, Yoda, Tom Bombadil being a little too much or something. I don't know. But so far, if this is the tone is kind of what they're going to do with him, then it's working really well, and I'm really impressed.
I agree. This was a big risk, and they really pulled it off in a series that we ourselves at the start of this episode criticized sometimes for its ham-fisted writing and acting. This is an example of where it really came together. So I really loved everything in Rune, and I just think it is a big achievement, and it's a big improvement on last year. So all happy.
And I think it's a playground that there's not a lot known in the world about. So you can just kind of do stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully people won't be so upset about it,
Absolutely. Anything else to say about this bit, or should I move on to Numenor?
Wonder why it became a desert, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so meanwhile, back in Numenor, which we only get to in episode 3, which is interesting actually, because we spent so much time there in season 1 from memory. And of course, my favourite, dreamy Elendil, because I really fancy that actor. So Lord Pharazôn has tapped into the nation's outrage with Miriel and her loyal faithful, capital F, in the aftermath of her strategic failure in the Southlands, now Proto-Mordor. Muriel discovers her father's palantir, which of course is very ironic, seeing as she's lost her sight. At her coronation, her use of the palantir is revealed. And when an eagle appears to favor Pharazôn, he is crowned instead, which I think would open up questions about, did Pharazôn arrange for the eagle to arrive? I mean, the eagle also could have arrived for Muriel, but because the people have been whipped up, or the Numenorians have been whipped up into a sort of populist frenzy, they interpret the eagle arriving as being something that favors Pharazôn. So basically we have a coup d'etat, effectively. That's what this storyline is.
The eagle confused me.
Yeah, Elendil's daughter is very, very involved in this and very pro-Pharazôn. Adam, how did you feel about this Numenorian coup?
I mean, I guess we knew, Farazan was gonna take
Yes.
power. It was very quick. The eagle thing was confusing to me. I guess it maybe just wasn't executed well because they foreshadowed, when eagle shows that's it's really good, and the eagle doesn't say anything, and it's her coronation, and they're in the middle of it, and this eagle just sort of shows up, and it could have easily been like, "Hey, shut up!" Like she's good. You could have easily interpreted it that way, and suddenly they're like, "Oh no, it's here for him," and I'm like, "Where are you getting that from?" I'm so confused. Um, but I guess you're right. It's like they're ready to go. They got the dark magic ball. All rile them up with everything going on, and it just spirals from there. So
Yeah, I did
maybe
like
a little
it
too
though.
quick.
I actually thought this was pretty well written and pretty exciting. And again, I think Numenor is where you really see the beauty of the costumes and the set design. And I loved this section. Mary, what about you?
Yeah, confused about the eagle thing as well, because indeed, it could have. The first thing I thought when it came was like, oh, Muriel is going to get a bit of hope from this, and maybe the coup is not going to happen all at once now. But it didn't end up this way. I'm very annoyed with Elendil's daughter.
Yes.
She's very, yeah, I mean, talk about characters that are supposed to be some kind of gray characters and are instead very unnuanced, and I think she's not very well written. With the whole thing in Numenor, and I thought that in this season 1 too, I think it could be very political, very interesting, and we see that in other shows, in House of the Dragon, in Game of Thrones. We see that you can have a political intrigue and dialogues that are interesting, and you don't get much of that here. So it's supposed to be a very intriguey part of the show, and you get half dialogues where nothing is really being said, but at the same time, it's fake mysterious and fake intrigue. I'm not really into it. So I think that's a shame, because that's a part of the story that they could have really done well with better writing. That's a part of the story that's not so hard to adapt. Having a political intrigue and a coup. That's writing
right
101.
Because we get the whole like, why are you guys in this dive bar scene?
Yeah,
like what?
It did feel very compressed to me, and we've had 4 episodes, and that was all that happened in Numenor. It's basically one section, and I feel that this is a major part of what's going on, and it didn't get much airtime. So maybe that played into it, and I felt that Elendil's daughter. The reason why she's attracted to this populist Pharazon is because she's grieving for her brother, and she doesn't understand why the sacrifice had to be made. And I think that could have been a very nuanced, moving character, like the good person who does something that we don't agree with, but for kind of good, sensible reasons in her own mind and out of grief and emotion. And I agree with you, Mary, just poorly written. So anything else? Sorry.
Well, on her, we don't have enough time between her and her father to understand the relationship. We don't really have enough time between her and her brother to also understand the relationship. And so, we can understand grief, but it's
theoretical.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she just comes off as nasty.
Yeah.
She comes across as entitled and annoying. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anything else on Numenor?
Architecture's cool. City looks good still.
It looks amazing, right?
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
It holds up to anything from the trilogy, so.
Yeah. So meanwhile, back in Middle-earth, we discover that Isildur is actually alive and has been freed from Sheila shenanigans. He runs into Arondir, who has meanwhile buried his love interest Bronwyn, I think because the actress wanted to leave the series to do other stuff. Her son Theo rejects his gift from healing. He doesn't want to take his mother's place. He's also grieving. Isildur confesses to Estrid that his mother died saving him, and he lied about it. And he goes to rescue his horse Beric, but Theo is captured. And then it all comes to a head in episode 4, which is quite heavy actually in this setting. So in episode 4, the search for Theo continues, with Estrid's knowledge of the area taking the party north. After being confronted by Arondir, Estrid attacks the elf and attempts to flee. She's quickly caught, and Arondir shows off a burn, a self-inflicted wound that hides the mark of Adar. They later scour the area where Theo might be held, but Arondir and Isildur are attacked by a creature and they are submerged in mud until they are aided by Estrid. And Arundel then kills the quote-unquote nameless thing. Estrid attempts to betray Isildur, who says he will protect her from those wishing to cast her out. In the chaos, they're confronted by Ents and Entwives. Arundel eventually pacifies them by asking for forgiveness for how the people of Middle-earth have treated the land, which I actually found strangely moving. And it's also revealed that Theo has been held by the Ents. So a lot of ground here to cover, a lot of characters. Adam, do you want to take a first stab at this one?
Yeah, I will say that like the loss of Bronwyn is kind of awkward. I didn't really care much about that plot, I'll be honest. The love story thing last season, but I guess, it's real world stuff. She wanted to leave, so it's just like she dies off screen is kind of sad. Would have been nice to like give her a better send off than that. But yeah, we get a lot happened here. I still kind of just don't really care about like what's going on here in these people all that much. I mean, maybe I should. But the Ents were cool. The Entwives, I kind of get a feeling that like in the future when they get lost, it's because the Entwives just like don't have any time for some bullshit and disappear. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what we're doing down here or what's the point is going to be. At some point, Isildur has to get back, or yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't really care about any of these characters. I think Isildur, you feel like you should because Isildur, but this all seems like so much.
But he's also kind of a shit, right? Like,
yeah, and that's fine.
Eventually. But yeah,
but
he's supposed to be important. He's important.
I just feel I had way much more fun in Rune and more fun in all the various leadings up to Eregion, and Numenor looked better. So this was actually my least favourite of the various locales that we were in. And again, I just thought it was a silly bait and switch with Isildur being dead but not dead. I just feel the screenwriters here just like to kind of give us kind of little traps and little teasers, and it's just like, get over it. Just tell us a good story, guys.
Yeah.
Mary, over to you.
One thing I liked is I think there's a lot of foreshadowing for Isildur's end. A lot of seeing dead people in rivers or in ponds, and himself being dragged kind of under water / mud is to me reminiscent of his own death at some point. So that was a nice touch, I think. Other than that, I was 0% sad about Bronwyn, which says a lot about the way her character was written. Obviously, I didn't really care, which, I mean, sorry, but yeah. I think Theo is okay.
Clear.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I think I don't know if we should be hard. I think I'm harder on the writers than I am on the actors. I think most of them probably would do a better job and be more convincing if the dialogues were better. But nope. And
yeah. The Southlands, I feel like, serve the purpose of creating Mount Doom, right?
Yeah. So it could be very interesting it could be at least emotionally interesting to follow through with those characters, but at the moment it's not really. The Ents were cool. The Entwife, yes. I'm not sure if she's flowery because she's female or because of some kind of biology that because I don't know how trees and flowers works. But
so she's the Entwife.
Yeah, she has flowers, so she must be female. That bothered me a bit, but that's fine.
It's very gender normative, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there are male and female trees, like fruit trees. You have to have one of each in order to get fruit. And
Yeah,
Like I
but
know that, but I don't really know
They're
much
not
about
really
trees.
trees, though, are they? They're Ents, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the voice cast though. Having Jim Broadbent as the male Ent was really awesome, and I love Olivia Williams, so I'm just very happy with the voices. They were as I would want my Ents to be, and I think a lot of the lore masters online have sort of criticized this as fan service, and I'm like, I'm a fan and I'm served. I mean, like I feel very happy
Yeah,
with
like
this.
sometimes like, servicing the fans is the point,
Yeah,
and it's okay.
that's
yeah, and
okay.
a
I
lot
mean,
of
this was
things.
by far the highlight for me of this section. So.
So it worked. And I think a lot of things that are good about this show is because they emulate a bit what we saw in the Peter Jackson's movies, and we get some lines that are very close to lines we got from the original Lord of the Rings. We get just the way it's filmed, the scenery, the landscapes. I think those are all good things to keep from the Peter Jackson's movie and movies and try to do again. And yeah, so I'm not bothered by that. I actually find it really good.
Beloved films, so all to the good. Anything else to say about the Southlands?
I will just say, just on Murray's point, like the fact that they're not filming this in New Zealand, but still are able to kind of evoke a lot of that same imagery and nature and stuff. Like they're doing a pretty good job about trying to keep that consistent.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, nothing about the way this is put together is bad. Like the way it looks, the way it feels, the costumes, the scenery. It's the best you're going to get on TV.
Yeah. I mean, it's and that's just it. Is like there are aspects of this production that are like 10 out of 10. Like I'm not going to ask for anything more. And then we get lines of dialogue where you're like, what?
I would love to raid their props department. There's some jewelry and some crown type stuff and some swords and I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in this show. But you know what? I think having talked about it with you guys today, I continue to believe that this is actually a big improvement on season one. And the things that really hit me, like for all of Rune to work and for a lot of the Eregion stuff to really work for me. I mean, that's big. And to get Tom Bombadil hopefully continuing to be right, I think is a really big win. So it's by no
and it'll
means
be
flawless.
sad if it doesn't get watched.
Yeah, it'd be sad if it doesn't make it to season 3. Let's see what the back end of the show does, I guess.
Yeah, they could still fuck it up.
Yeah, but I do hope it continues to. I mean, I hope there's a season 3, and with it's not an amazing show, but it's definitely not that bad. I think it deserves more.
I agree. Well, let's see if they stick the landing. We have another 4 weekly episodes to go. And I think by the sounds of it, we might just do an episode at the end of it, unless if something amazing happens in 5 and 6, if you'll want to do a sort of an episode after 5 and 6, we can. I'll follow your lead.
Play it by ear.
Yeah, see how it goes.
I mean, because there's going to be some sort of big conflict from the trailers. Like we're going to go at it, it looks like. So I don't know if that's going to be towards the end or... I mean, we kind of thought that was going to happen in season 1 too, right? And a lot of the big bits we got from the trailer for season 1 were like that prelude, showing all the battle and stuff.
It would be hilarious.
Numenorian charge.
It'd be so funny if the big fancy battle of 2024 ended up being in this rather than Hot D.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oof.
I know. And I'm going to say it. I have enjoyed this. And maybe it's because I'm not as wedded to the source material or the world, but I don't know. I've really enjoyed this more than I did season 2. I felt like when they first came out, season 1 of House of the Dragons was so much better than season 1 of Rings of Power. But I feel House of the Dragons got worse and this became better. And so to me, actually, Rings of Power controversially is probably better in season 2 than Hot D in season 2. But let's wait and see what happens in the back end. You sound skeptical, Mary.
I don't agree with that, but
I still think House of the Dragon is a much more competently executed show.
Yeah.
My friends, this has been joyous and it's been lovely, Mary, having you back on. And let's reunite either mid or end of the back half of the season.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Posse out.
Thank you, Bina.
Thanks,
Bye,
Bina.
everyone.